Before I tell you this story, we're gonna need to go back in time. Back in time to the year 2020. I know, horrible. Though more specifically, August 19th, 2020. While the show did air on August 19th, 2020, we need to go back to at least early September or close to November, I think. Well, I've been very brief and hardly ever, told my life off YouTube and stuff. I need to dive a little bit into it so you guys would understand. So basically, one afternoon, I walked down after finished filming one of the videos, who knows what it was, when I saw my father watching some video game documentary on Netflix. I don't know if I watched it with him or not, I don't remember. But the next day, I went back, I found the documentary, and I watched the whole thing. And my mind was pretty blown about what was in that documentary. It's a 6-part series about various video games, and it talks about how video games got started and stuff. Though there is a lot of video games, and that is worth my time to talk about something else. Trust me, that'll come soon. I'm mostly going to talk about episode number 5, Fight. Before we begin, I need to say a disclaimer warning because this is not for kids. The documentary is rated TV-14, but don't really let that scare you if you're old enough to watch it. Obviously, get permission with your parents first. But just to let you know, it's not for kids. You might get bored. Sure, just regular documentary stuff. The Fight episode even kind of gives a disclaimer.
Warning, the episode you're about to watch features violent video games.
Now, before you guys are all going off, what does this kid do at night? I'm just really fascinated by this stuff. If you guys want to get to the meat of this episode, head to this timestamp here. So the first game they talk about is Street Fighter. Street Fighter is a very fascinating experience with a whole variety cast of characters from pretty much every country and region. Basically, global audience. But the most famous thing in Street Fighter, or person in Street Fighter, was the decidance to have a female fighter named Chun-Li. Because at the time, they were, princesses and little ladies that need help, or that cute little Miss Pac-Man. Personally, even though I haven't played the game for that fact, I kind of feel sorry for it. Everyone seems to point fingers that this is the game, this is the franchise, this is the main key event that started the whole controversial graphic violence thing. Sure, it's not the best game out there, but it is a drop in the bucket and the very least pretty wimpy compared to the next game on the list, Mortal Kombat. Hello to the person who fast-forwarded to this part. We're talking about the game Mortal Kombat. Now, personally, this is technically the game that started the whole video game controversy thing, and I'm not taking sides here, but it does weigh a lot into the whole that's where this all started thing. But we'll get to that in a minute. Right now, let's just talk about the game for a minute, okay? One of the things everyone seems to forget when everyone talks about Mortal Kombat is that the game wasn't meant for kids. It was meant for adults, because back then only kids played video games. They want to get the adults, early teens in there as possible. Another thing everyone seems to disregard is that, again, the game was not meant for kids, but no one was telling people how to make games back then. It was just whatever you want. In my opinion, this game is basically just, we're two teenagers, we've watched a whole bunch of Hollywood movies over the last weekend, let's make a video game. One of the personally odd things about this game for me is that they wanted players to be scared to play this. There's something in the game called fatalities, and if you press right number of buttons, you get a very gruesome game over screen. It's very troubling. One of the most notable things here that there is this arena that's filled with spikes and everyone's in pale. I probably should censor this. Basically, the thing in this, if you died, who knows what happened to you, and that leaves nothing up to the imagination, let me tell you that.
Fatalities were the game's pièce de résistance. Players who discovered the right button and joystick combo could finish off their opponent with a spectacular kill. A decapitation. The removal of a still beating heart. Torching them alive. And whatever you call this, What also made Mortal Kombat so in your face was the fact that the characters were real-life actors.
So, Street Fighter is interesting, and Mortal Kombat is certainly a sight to behold. Now, let's take care of the final game, Night Trap. I'll watch this, and I'll get back to you guys. Okay, there's the opening title card. This looks good. I wonder what's so... the things I do for you. So this game is pretty odd, to say the least. There's a lot of girls running around in bikini tops, and the boys seem to all die in the first 5 minutes. I mean, look at this box art. Oh, Congress, could you take a look at this, please? Let's talk about Lethal Enforcers. While it is just a regular cop game, there is some shootings in it, and if you get shot, it looks like there's been a bullet through the screen. That's pretty interesting, but the only problem is with the home release, the little arcade cabinet thingy came with real-life lookalikes of revolvers. That kind of freaked out parents a little bit. That's pretty much all I can tell you now. There's obviously a lot more than that. A lot more than that. Basically, this is pretty much where it was heading until Congress got involved. 1993! The Congressional Hearing on Video Games! Congress instated in 1993 the Congressional Hearing on Video Games. Basically, everyone has had enough of these violent video games. Now, that may sound odd, but let me explain. Basically, when violent video games were created and stuff like that, it was more of a competition. Basically, Nintendo and Sega has been hitting it off these past few years, and the competition was getting ridiculous. Who could make the better game? Who could come up with the better 8-bit technology? The games that were held on trial are Mortal Kombat, Night Trap, and Lethal Enforcers. I think we can all agree that no matter what side you are, that the video games are good, video games that people violent, whatever side you're on, I think we can all agree that the parents weren't happy about this at all, and neither was Congress. So this is what Senator Herbert Cole had to say about this, about those games I just mentioned. Enjoy.
Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are not the kind of gifts that responsible parents give. Night Trap, which adds a new dimension of violence specifically targeted against women, is especially repugnant. It ought to be taken off the market entirely, or at the very least, its most objectionable scenes should be removed. But those games are only 2 examples. Let me tell you about another video game called Lethal Enforcers. It comes with a special piece of hardware, an oversized handgun called the Justifier. And what does this game seem to teach our kids? Basically, that a gun can solve any problem. With Lethal Enforcers, sometimes the player hits innocent bystanders. In that case, blood splatters to the ground. But what the heck? Bystanders need to learn to get out of the way.
About 2 months ago, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game, in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse, in my judgment.
And now I bring you back to the beginning, the game controversy that started all of this. Violent video games are always inevitable. Someone out there always wants to be better, someone always wants to get attention, and I'm okay with that. Sure, we just need to look out for it, but we don't play those games. We don't look up walkthroughs and stuff like that. We need to be vigilant, okay? Not taking sides here. I leave you with the video from the game theorists. Are games to blame, and do video games cause violence? That is the only matter I can determine for this. Please go watch that video on the iCard. Then make your judgment. See you later.
Whenever we see the news talking about video games these days, it seems like it's always the same thing.
In the 2 decades since Columbine, video games have been at the center of the controversy surrounding gun violence in America.
Particularly violent video games.
And it has experts and some parents alarmed.
This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
Then again, this type of alarm is nothing new. Roll that early 90s VHS tape.
You can knock your opponent's head off. complete with electronic blood and guts. The game is called Mortal Kombat, one of the hottest video games going.
You ever feel like going out and beating somebody up after watching this game? Tell me the truth.
Yes.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? But to be fair, our counter arguments back in the early 90s were exactly the same too.
It's not our fault. It's just a game.
So you know what? It's time to change the conversation. And that's my goal with today's episode, to move beyond this he said, she said style of argument that this topic's been mired in for decades. Instead, we need to get down to the real story, the scientific fact. Do video games actually make people more violent?